Welcome to Mastery with Science, home to mad scientists, rogue entrepreneurs, and the coaches with the mostest, featuring JB and the Doctor. Join us in our lab where we mix the old recipes with new formulas and our secret sauce to create incomparable, next-level proven results for you. We call this Mastery with Science. So, slap on your gloves and put on your goggles because JB and the Doctor are in the lab.
It's alive!
Welcome back to the lab. I'm JB.
I'm the Doctor.
We are really excited today to introduce some special guests from Liberated Badass. That's right, I said Liberated Badass. We've got Sarah Kostrub, Leslie, and John Waller joining us, co-founders and partners of, I'm going to say it again, Liberated Badass, because I love it so much. It's such a great name. Sarah and John have spent over 30 years of combined experience as traditional mental health therapists and clinical directors, but they found themselves feeling, hey, is this it? And they ended up starting their own transformations. They know what it's like to play by the rules, working for promotions and significance, but not feeling good enough. As a team, they help pull each other out of the miserable and into a liberated lifestyle where they can feel excited and alive. Today, they help other high achievers invest in a life they truly love with their Liberated Badass movement. Sarah, John, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Right off the bat, I've got to ask the question. Liberated Badass, where'd the name come from? Because I absolutely love it.
That's great. Thank you for the feedback. We love it too. The way I think about Liberated Badass, the name, it really came from other people. So a couple of years ago when I started out on sort of this new liberated lifestyle, as I call it, I started doing things like skydiving and resigning from my job and making some really big, bold moves. And I would post these things on Facebook for fun and to let people know what's going on with me and to really be able to share the message of, hey, I've been like a relatively conservative person most of my life and it wasn't working for me. I was getting bored and slowly feeling like, whoa, I don't actually want to be living anymore. This is like not fun. And I had some radical transformations happening, which allowed for these really cool opportunities to happen. I started doing big, bold leaps. And so people started posting in response things like, wow, you're so liberated. Wow, you're such a badass. And I'm like looking at myself like, who are they talking about? Because like, I would not use either one of those names, titles, adjectives to describe myself. And so over time and in conversations with John, I was like, what do you think about this? And slowly it just came together.
Very, very cool. I get a kick that jumping out of an airplane and quitting your job are on the same level of bold, because I think for a lot of us, I would rather jump out of an airplane than quit my jobs previously. So I actually really appreciate that. John, how about it from your side? How did you and Sarah meet? How did you really get involved with the Liberated Badass movement yourself?
Well, Sarah and I go back. We both worked together at the same company, and we were basically the leadership team of where we were working. And so we became friends. We worked really well together, and both recognized that we were in a situation where we just really weren't happy about where we were and the limitations of, there's a phrase, everyone has a boss. And that is true. And my boss is great. Sarah was my boss back then. But the boss's boss, it didn't produce a situation of really loving what we do and really presenting limitations. So that's how we met. And she was the first to make the bold leap to go on her own. I did so a couple months later. My journey was a little bit different. I did experiment with the going to a different job and expecting different results before I finally got out of there and got liberated. But I love the name. I love how provocative it is, that it sticks out, and it even forces me outside of my comfort zone of, wanting to look good and wanting to look proper, versus like, nope, I'm going to be super bold. I'm going to be putting it fully out there. So that's why I love the name. And I think, Sarah, you should mention how committed you got to the name. You're very committed to the
Yes,
name.
I became very committed. Very committed to the name. And like I said, it was really something that other people were calling me. So at the same time of using it for the name of my business, I was also processing and digesting that people are calling me this liberated badass. And so it took some time for me to really take on the name and be like really comfortable with, yeah, I am a liberated badass. And I am doing all these big, bold things that the average person just isn't doing. I definitely don't feel like that when I'm in the process of being big and bold. There's still, like there is for everyone, those normal feelings of fear and hesitancy and like, oh my gosh, am I really going to jump out of an airplane? Am I really going to do this thing that's causing me all this fear and anxiety? But so part of my learning style is that if I have something that I'm really wanting to remember, I will write it down on a note card or a sticky note, which John knows very well. My computer is oftentimes covered with sticky notes, so I have to regularly clean those sticky notes out to keep the most important ones in front of me. And so the other thing that I had not done before up till 40 was get a tattoo. And it was just one of the many things that I had wanted for years and years. And it was like, no, that's not the right thing to do. Just growing up, my background was not in favor of tattoos. And so it was something I could never do. And so at 40 was this whole realization of like, actually, I can do whatever I want to. There are obviously consequences for doing things. But at the end of the day, I no longer have to listen to the voices. I can actually make my own decisions. So I actually wanted a tattoo and went with Liberated Badass. You can't actually see it here since we're not on video, but I have it on the left arm, the bicep area of my left arm. And every time I look down, I'm reminded that's who I am. Anytime I start to forget, anytime I start to feel that fear, that anxiety, that uncertainty, I'm like, oh, hey, just remember, it's right here. This is who you are.
So I've seen that tattoo. It's on your website, and I'm impressed by commitment. I always used to say there's nothing I want in my life that permanent except a house and like a wife and kids. And now I've had like 3 houses. So maybe I should just be getting a tattoo. My question is, we can see yours. And John, I know you're a very committed guy. Where are you hiding your tattoo, buddy?
Oh yeah, it's in a place where I can't even see it. I don't even remember where it is.
All right, listeners, we're going to have a poll. Where do you think John's tattoo is?
Head on over to our community group and please put that in the comment section. So I think my favorite part of this podcast already, and if you can't tell like the kind of level that we work on here, JB is just ecstatic because he's got to say the word ass like 15 times to open up this episode.
I'm only at 7. I've been counting. I've got some left. I've got some gas left in the tank.
Like that South Park episode where we're counting the amount of times he says it, so we see if we violate an FCC violation.
Oh yeah, you should add a little ding. Add a little ding every time he says it
in the corner.
That's funny. That is a thing though, because even that in and of itself, right? For me growing up, there was certainly no swearing and no use of any too provocative words. So for me to now be using badass in my business, I'm saying it all the time. And so like my nieces and nephews, when this first started transforming and coming together, they would ask, wait, what did you just say? And it would give me a moment to pause and think, oh, I am saying technically a word that has been not allowed to be said, has been taboo from saying, but now it just rolls off my tongue. And it's been really great for conversations with family and people who would normally be like, oh, that's a bad word, you shouldn't say that. I've even had a couple of clients who have been offended that there was a curse word in the name. And I can't remember, I had one client who changed the name for how she saves it in her contacts of me. But it's been great for me to be able to work through that with people and myself. And there's been a couple of times where I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should change the name because people are like offended. And then the question has always come back to me, well, do you really want to work with people who are not going to work with you because you have that in your business name? Is that really the person you're looking to work with? So it's been an interesting transformation. And that is a question that comes up, even using that word badass.
Mm-hmm. And that's
we have a
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that's a big part of how I conceptualize liberation is moving past whatever assumptions there are, moving past fear of what others think, so that you can boldly be who you are. I mean, I'm someone that would, maybe in the past would think the word badass to be like, a super macho thing and something that would make me roll my eyes, versus really embracing it that, well, number one, we define the word. Like we decide for ourselves what that word means, and then to allow myself to have the boldness to apply that label to what we're doing. That's the other part that I really love about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get a lot, especially people from the world that I grew up in, who are like skeptical of this liberated badass title and make judgments around what it means, and that there's some assumed meaning behind the word liberated. And then certainly when you combine liberated badass, it sounds like this person who's like breaking all the rules and, I don't know, riding a motorcycle and dressed in leather, which I'm definitely not that person. And at the same time, I think so much of what it has meant for me is breaking all the rules and being okay with consideration of breaking the rules. Now, I'm not like a wild person that actually goes out and is intentionally breaking all the rules, but there are a lot of rules in my life that I've overcome, which is what we now provide with clients, is this opportunity to take a look at all the rules that they've been using to govern themselves and the things that they have believed for all of these years that they have to do or should do, to be able to take a step back and be like, let's evaluate these rules. And have they gotten you where you want to go? And are there some of the rules that you'd actually like to change? And so I know for John and I, we've really taken the time to look at those rules. And I actually have let go of a lot of them, just like the tattoo thing. And for a time period, I was dyeing my hair red and pink and purple, because again, it was one of those things growing up that was like, no, you can't dye your hair funky colors. And then by 40, I'm like, who says I can't dye my hair purple? Like, why? And ironically, for a short story, I've dyed my hair now a couple of times with my youngest niece. We have special experience days together. And at first, when I let my family know that I was just going to be dyeing my hair, they were like, oh no, don't do that. It was the immediate reaction. It took them a moment for them to realize, no, this isn't up for conversation. This is an FYI. This is happening. And I took my niece with me to do it that day. And in return, my sister actually was like allowing of her to get her hair dyed. So she also dyed her hair a fun color. And so I know for me, it was like, oh, this is awesome that my niece, who's 6, just turned 7, is able to have this experience at a very young age, where this no longer will be one of those rules that governs her or holds her back or makes her think like, oh, I can't do this thing. There's something wrong with it. And it won't allow her, it will provide her the opportunity to not judge people who've decided to dye their hair some funky color. Because I certainly growing up would have judged other people for having their hair funky colors. Why? I don't know. It was just like this thing that got decided at an early age that there was something wrong with that.
It's never too early to turn a kid into a badass. That's the lesson I took away from that. It took me to high school, and this is very, very secretive, but I did have my hair dyed Smurf blue for a very short period of time one summer in high school, because you know what? I love that idea of breaking the rules and the authenticity there of really, a lot of these rules are self-imposed. And so the authenticity of that. And it speaks to something that you two have brought up with the doctor and I before we even started talking here. I think a lot of rules and the lifestyles that we choose to live are driven by some of these really kind of nasty emotions that we deal with. You've used the word shame before, I think, in a lot of what you talk about. Can you just speak to that and kind of that role in who you are and how it's created you and how you help others with that? I'm just very curious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Ironically, part of my story with shame is that I knew of shame, but I would not say I actually intimately got to know shame until I was 40. And I'm 20 years of being a professional therapist. So I often ask myself, how did that happen? Right? I've been through schooling, I've been clinically trained, and yet somehow I did not intimately know shame. However, I intimately knew shame without actually knowing her name. And so I knew her very well in my life and in the way that I was living, and got to 40 with the realization that shame was actually running a lot of my life. And there were all of these unwritten rules that had been established growing up, and that I was living out of without even fully knowing it. And so that has been part of my liberation experience, is to become very aware of shame, intimately shame. The way that John and I talk about it in our content is becoming friends with shame, so that I'm able to help clients, help people really identify that part of themselves that has felt very confined, very small, very put down, very not good enough, and help them break free from that, get really clear with what that actually looks like in their life and how it's affecting them, how it's controlling them, and the things that they're doing, and more importantly, the things that they're not doing, and be able to break free from those unwritten rules that are oftentimes what's holding people back. John, you want to comment?
Yeah, I just think that, shame is could be considered a 4-letter word for a lot of people. And a lot of people, the context of shame is it's something that somebody else does to you. Someone shames you. You've been shamed in a community or in a family or whatever. That is some sort of punishment, rather than just an emotion, a perfectly normal, healthy emotion that happens on the individual level. And so I love I think Sarah came up with the idea of being friends with the shame, because it's such a game changer, because it takes the stinkiness off of it. It makes it less of a boogeyman and more of just a real phenomenon that you're dealing with, sometimes day to day. I know myself, without even being fully aware of it, was ruled by shame for like so many years, where it creates this feeling of imposter syndrome at work, where I was afraid to be the leader that I was meant to be at work. It affects my relationships, where instead of being true to myself, I get focused on, well, what does this other person want from me? Or rather, what do I think this other person wants from me? So it would create not a very good pattern there, for sure. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I love this idea of just embracing it, calling it by name, embracing it, looking at it, and really seeing it more as a learning tool. Like anytime if I do still experience shame from time to time, I can look at it and go, what is shame trying to tell me? What am I learning from this? What do I need to do to take care of myself, to be true to myself, since I'm having this shame signal come in, and this emotion that's basically trying to teach me something.
I feel like the doc has definitely been working with you too, because he does a tremendous job of handling his shame, of working alongside me, because I'm shameless in a lot of ways. I'm not really, but yeah, I've been called that before. Doc, what about in your experience? Because I know you come from a background that probably speaks to this some as well. Can you talk a little bit about shame and how it can pull us away from what we want to do? And after that, Sarah and John, I'm very curious to see how shame pushed you into where you actually wanted to be.
First, that I love that we got to switch the demographics of our group this time. A lot of times we speak with a lot of business professionals, and now JB is surrounded by therapists or former therapists. And it's so nice. So nice. Even speaking before the shame, I think the big thing about rules, like most things, is very arbitrary, right? So these things are created by someone else, and we just assume that that's what they're supposed to do, right? That's a rule. Someone told me that I'm supposed to follow it, so we follow it. And then we create this shame if we don't follow this rule that is arbitrary to start with because someone else said it. Now, obviously, there's some things that are standard across society that, don't harm someone else, don't kill someone, don't steal from someone. That's generally good. But after that, a lot of the times we just follow these things because someone else in some other society created up. No knowledge of you, no knowledge of your experience, no knowledge of your wants and needs. And then we internalize that based off of their emotion and feel terrible because we're not living up to someone else's expectation of what our life should be. So hearing you guys and seeing the work that you guys do with people is lovely, because it kind of knocks down that. If you've listened to any JB and the Doctor podcast before, all you wonderful listeners that I'm sure have them on download and repeat, we talk about one size doesn't fit all. We talk about that we are not all the same. And even in our sales talk, we show that those things aren't one size fit all. Not everything fits into certain rules that are put in front of us. Challenge those rules, break those rules, and experience what else you can experience. And I love that message you guys put forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say for myself personally, as far as shame was as the driver to make changes, I really got to a place a few years ago where I was just miserable. And between the job and my life overall situation and my just overall feeling inside of my head, I was under so much shame of feeling like knowing I have everything that I need, and I have tons of what most people don't even get to have. Great job, great position, lots of money for a social worker, and great house, great place to live, great friends, great network, great family, like amazing in all of those categories. And yet there was something really missing. There was something still quite wrong, quite amiss. And I got to that place and I was like, man, what is wrong with me? I mean, in the silent times and the quietness of my own space, I would have these very real moments of there is something very wrong with me. And so for me, that's really the heart of shame, is when we're internalizing and we're saying there's something wrong with me. There's something internally, inherently wrong with me. And so for myself, reaching out to get help, and fortunately am surrounded by lots of wonderful professionals in my network and got connected with some amazing people to help me really evaluate my own rules and give me that moment to pause and say, hey, let's check this out. Let's see if this is really what's real, or if this is the story you're coming up with based on, like the doctor was saying, based on the rules that you've been living by. And sure enough, when I step back and I look at it, it's like, oh, this is just the set of rules that I've been given, and I haven't reevaluated them as an adult to be able to ask whether or not they're working for me. It's not actually working for me that I can't dye my hair fun colors, that I can't get a tattoo, that I have to keep working in this job because it's giving me a really good income, or that I have to live in this house because it's a great deal. It's super financially a good decision, and had been guided by great people to make these decisions, to keep the house, to keep the job. But at the end of the day, it wasn't satisfying who I was meant to be. It wasn't satisfying who I truly am in my heart. And so I had to come to that place of saying, hey, if this isn't actually who I am living as an imposter. And so for me, a lot of my life, I felt like I was wearing a mask. And this was my opportunity, my confrontation with my own shame and my own awareness of this is not who I am. This person that's playing by all of these rules, that's actually not who I am. And so it was this process, and continues to be a process, of taking off the mask and being able to really be who I am, fully stepping into my true identity. And so that's the wonderful work we get to do with clients, is helping people that come to us looking for help, who have come to us with that same story. What's wrong with me? Why can't I figure it out? I have the significant other, I have the house, I have the job, I have all of the things that seem to be the right things. I've done all of like the things that they say you're supposed to do. And yet somehow I'm still like miserable. I feel like there's something so like wrong with me. And we get to sit alongside of people, walk alongside of them, as John and I say, we get to walk through the journey with them and say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're living by a different set of rules, a different set of standards, and you're falling short because that's not actually who you are meant to be.
And I think Sarah touched on something there as far as what I consider one of the requirements of liberation is to have support. I mean, the person Sarah just described, and I know that because I definitely had that experience as well, where everything seems to be great on the outside, but you're stuck, you're still miserable, and you feel like, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I do this on my own? And we truly believe that the key is having support, having someone with you. Sarah and I will often use this metaphor that we're like, have been mountain climbers, climbing a mountain together, and like, you know, we're one of us is ahead and helping pull the other person up. And then maybe I jump ahead and then I got to pull her up. And we've been doing that for years, working together, helping each other through this process of personal growth, dramatic change, making huge leaps. But we do it with support. I think that's so vital. And that's pretty much the biggest reason why we love what we do and why we do what we do, because we know support's needed. So that's what we want to do for people. We want to come in and be that support to help lift people up the mountain, so to speak.
There's a few things you two mentioned. I'm gonna pick out a little bit for our listeners because I really appreciated them. First of all, I was gonna call you both really serious badasses, because to be able to do this on your own is just incredible. But yeah, it's amazing, John, because I agree. Having the support of somebody makes all the difference. We oftentimes, and we see this in business without fail, we're our own worst enemies, always. And it's not the outside competition. It's not the external factors. It's us. And it's the way we think about things and look at things that is really challenging and stymieing so often. So to be able to identify that, but then have each other to support one another, and then to bring that into a business and build that into a business is just phenomenal. It's awesome. The second thing that really stood out to me is we are very often victims of our assumptions. And it's really easy to fall into these assumptions and live your life built around them. It's really, from my perspective, it's a lot like the rules you talked about, Sarah. We have these rules, and a lot of them are built off assumptions, I would argue. At least that's what I see in the business world. We assume this, we assume that, and if we don't actively look to question that foundation of our beliefs, we're going to struggle in business. And from what I'm hearing from you, we're going to struggle in our authenticity as well, and just getting to that liberated lifestyle where we all want to be. I don't think any of our listeners don't want to be liberated. They must be hearing you and going, oh my gosh, if this isn't me right now, I want this. That's incredible, because it's the dream for so many people out there. Just love this stuff. It's fantastic. Hey, JB, what you're doing.
What does assume mean?
Hey, he sets me up. I love it. Assume makes an ass out of you and me.
Classic.
So a little aside for our guest and listeners, we were on doing a collab with another business, and they were talking about assuming. JB gets real serious, looks at her, and says, "Am I allowed to say the word ass?" And she's like, "No, you're not." And he's like, "Damn." Because he loves to use that line, and she took that away from him. So I wanted to give it back to him today.
Nice.
Thank you. I did use it. I just wasn't allowed to record it. So I got to throw it at her. She just didn't let it stick. She didn't like it.
He was denied.
But yeah.
She was not liberated.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that you just said about assumptions. And I think often what holds us back is assumptions about ourselves. I mean, sometimes it comes from outside people, but we create our own limiting assumptions. Just as we're talking, I went back and I remembered early on, my dad always used to say, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Now he was he left a job and he created his own business. He was very successful with this. So he very much valued being self-employed and working for yourself. And I heard that message all the time, lead, follow, and get out of the way. But at the time, because I didn't fully believe in myself, even when I was a kid or a teen, I created the assumption that I have to be one of the ones who follow or get out of the way, that lead was not an option. So I created this assumption for myself that the best I'm going to do is to be a good worker bee. So any job I had, I would do really well, and I would rise to the top, as far as being the best worker, so that I can really please my boss was really my goal. Let me be the best worker bee. Even though I really love the idea of working on my own. So part of my liberation was dropping that assumption that I had created for myself, so I could finally get out of the situation where, I'm having to work for, whether it's a mid-sized company or whatever it is. And for the first time in my life, being self-employed, which I absolutely love.
How do you at Liberated Badass, how do you find that the top 2 or 3 ways you help people really address this and start to make the shift? Because it's a process, it's a journey, but what are the top 2 or 3 ways right off the bat you find that you're able to help people the most?
One of my favorite questions to ask people is, what do you want? What do you most want? So the way that I end most of my content when I'm doing lives and podcasts and stuff is, go do that thing you most want. And the reason I keep saying it to people is because when I'm in conversation with people, whether I'm talking to potential clients, I'm talking to friends, or I'm talking to like the person on the bar stool next to me when I'm out for dinner, most of the time people don't actually know what they most want. They know what they're supposed to be doing, right? Most of us know what we're supposed to be doing, but what they most want, most people don't know. And most people don't talk about it. I have found in my conversations, especially the ones with the person to my right or left at the bar or out at some restaurant. When I've been single, I go out quite a bit and love to get into conversation with people. Are you doing the thing that you really want to be doing? And most people say no. And then I follow it up and say, well, do you know what that thing is? And that's like within 15 minutes. That's a conversation with me, typically within first 15 minutes. And people come up with this great description of what they most want. When I go into it with them, when I hold that space, that willingness to be able to really listen, to go deeper into the thing they really want. So certainly with clients, that's like a huge part of the work, is getting really clear. There's so much noise, so much stress, so many distractions, our phones going off constantly for most people, notifications dropping down on your computer all the time. Most people don't have the time to think about what it is they truly want to be doing with their life. They're just going along with the routine that everyone else is doing, following along the next thing, just trying to get through the day, trying to get through the week, without ever really considering, am I doing what I actually want to be doing? And am I going to get where I really want to be in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years? So we do a lot of mapping that out with people, really helping them first, cutting out the noise, getting rid of all these distractions. We can easily help people find about 2 hours that they insist that they don't have, right? The number one reason we come into contact with that people don't want to do the work or not ready to do the work is either that they don't have time or they don't have the money. And when we help people really sit down and consider the bigger picture, very quickly, we can show them how they can find much more time, significant amount of more time, and then help them get rid of those distractions that seem to pull them away from staying focused and being able to carve out that special time. And then also giving them tools and exercises to really getting clear about what it is they most want their life to look like.
You know, the doc and I couldn't agree more that there's a whole lot of time in people's days that they don't take advantage of. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, I've been called shameless. I'm gonna offer a shameless plug right now, because by the time this airs, we should be right at the wrap up of the launch of our very first course available online, which is a time mastery with science course designed specifically to help people drop more time. So it sounds like it's something that you do in your business as well. And I think the doctor and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because it's a huge need for people. We all,
absolutely,
especially today, are subject to so many distractions and derailers. It really can take away from a whole lot of our focus and ability to cut through the noise, as you said, Sarah.
We can see how this
definitely.
all comes.
I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we can see how this area, the world's come together, because if any of our listeners decide to work with Liberated Badass in the future, they already have the time component perfect because they took our course. So that's one less step that you can really focus right onto the next step there. That's how it all kind of goes
good.
together.
I love it.
Finding the why.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you know, for me, I would say the Liberated Badass, made me think of that, is really about a person knowing what they want, really being clear with what it is that they want and how to be able to get it, how to make it happen for themselves. And so it's easy for people to hear my story, to hear some of John's story and think, oh my gosh, we have to quit our jobs. I have to move, give away all my things. And for most people, that's a very abrasive thing when they hear my story about how I did leave my job, sell my home, and give away most of my things and move to my studio by the beach. It can feel very abrasive. And people are like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Oh my gosh, I don't know how you did that. Or they have questions about the money. There are always questions and lots of barriers to why they could never do it. And so for me, I quickly tell people, being a liberated badass does not mean you have to go do all those things. And it doesn't mean you have to get that tattoo on your bicep either. However, what it means is you really know what it is that you want personally for your life. If you love your job, great, but you're really not happy with your personal life in this area or that area, you're not as close to your kids as you'd want to be, you have issues with developing really good relationships, that can cause people real misery. And so being a liberated badass is being really clear with what you want and how to get it. Not at all that they have to do the same type of things that we've done.
What I find with some people I know well that struggle, I think with this specifically, is they never know even where to start. And from my perspective, if you're listening and you're dealing with this, I think where to start is you've got to be in touch with Sarah and John. Allow them to do what they do so well, which is to lead you to your why and to help you identify what that why is for you. They can help you take those very first steps. So if you're sitting there and you're going, I just don't know how to do it, I don't know how to do it. Here's the answer. Here's the solution. It's staring you right in the earbuds. Liberated Badass is going to help you do it right from the get-go. They're going to walk you through that. They're going to break down those barriers. They're going to give you what you need to really break out into who you want to be. It's incredible.
Thank you, JB. Appreciate it. Yeah, we've got lots of different ways for people to get connected to us. One of the most significant things that we do is over on Facebook. We run a free coaching group, Liberated Badass, and put up regular resources and live videos where we interact with people to help them get started, to get a little taste of what it's like to work with John and I, and be able to see some of our content, some of our philosophy, and hear more about our own personal stories about how we've done it for ourselves and how we've been able to help other people do it.
Also heard there was a rumor that there was something that you wanted to share with our audience as a gift for showing how awesome they are. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great handoff. Yeah, so we're giving away a free mini guide called Cut the Noise. And basically it's a mini guide that helps you cut the noise, get rid of distractions so that you can truly make time and make a priority that one thing you want to do to feel alive, even no matter how small, no matter how big it is. I mean, the reality is that it's one thing to know what you want. And I think oftentimes people don't know what they want because they don't have time to think about it, or they intentionally distract themselves from even asking that question, because that can be a very scary question to ask yourself because it forces you to challenge your status quo and status, change where you're at. So we offer this quick little guide. It's super simple. It's just one page, how to cut through the noise, cut through distractions, and really hone in on at least one little thing to do to feel alive. So you go to our website, liberatedbadass.net, and then you'll be able to go on there and we'll send you the guide.
And of course, all that information will be down below in the show notes, or you could always head over to our Facebook group that shares all the same information, which John and Sarah will also be members of that group, so that if you ever have any questions, you can ask us directly right from the podcast.
Awesome. And I'm such a believer. Sarah, John, this is for you. See this right here? I'm putting it right on the bicep with you, Sarah. Liberated Badass.
Nice.
I did it in pink too because I love it. You can't really read it, but it's there.
Great visual for all our listeners on the podcast.
For you, the first for you at home, JP just showed off his bicep for no reason. That's what that was. You're very strong, JP. I'm very impressed.
I was going to put it somewhere else, but I didn't feel like, where you can see me on video. I got to be careful.
We'll definitely have a picture of that on the Facebook page also.
That's good.
Well, Sarah.
Thank you, guys. This has been great.
Yeah, Sarah, John, thank you so much for joining us. Again, liberatedbadass.net. Check it out. Download the freebie. Get with them on our Facebook community group. If you haven't joined, join now. We've got some great guests, some great interviewers, and just a fantastic community that we're building out. All these details are in our show notes. Doc, where else can people find us?
You can head on over to Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or our favorite, our YouTube channel, where we do all kinds of fun and crazy things.
Like right on our biceps. Liberated Badass.
In our mouth.
And well, I really appreciate your time today, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm JB, and I'm signing out.
I'm the doctor. Peace out, yo.